Welcome to the OC24 podcast, where we've taken some of the best talks and discussions from this year's 24-hour conference on global organised crime, which showcases some of the most interesting research into organised crime around the world. This episode is called Tech Against the Illegal Wildlife Trade.
Good day, everybody. My name is Louise Taylor. I'm the Asia Pacific representative at the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organised Crime. Welcome to our session today that introduces some of the latest approaches in the technological sphere and how they can be applied to combat the illegal wildlife trade and environmental crime. Just to give a little bit of context to what the speakers will discuss today, the issues of the illegal wildlife trade and environmental crimes more broadly are some of the most problematic and worrying and persistent trends that we see in the world today. G7 ministers earlier this year, and to some extent at COP26 as well, they did recognise the significance of addressing criminal environmental markets as part of efforts to confront the interdependent crises of climate change and biodiversity loss, as they put it. They also went on to acknowledge the illicit threats to nature that the gamut of environmental crimes pose to nature, but also to societies. The Global Initiative's recently launched Organised Crime Index supports this assertion. We monitored the size and impact of a number of different criminal markets across all countries, and combined, both flora and then fauna markets are some of the most prevalent criminal markets across the globe. At the same time, and especially since the COVID pandemic, we've seen an exponential rise in cybercrime. To some extent, this reflects the broader and generally more positively perceived trend in access to cyberspace. We obviously live in a technological age where global access to electronic gadgets and smartphones continues to rise, fueled by decreasing prices and the expanding reach of the internet. This, of course, brings countless benefits to all of us and to the licit economy. But similar advantages have also then been conferred upon the illicit economy, where the conflation of these two cyber trends has meant that the expansion of an online and easily accessible market for illicit wildlife products is virtually accessible to all. It not only supplies demand, but then fuels it. New opportunities for advertising and coordinating the movement of wildlife species and products on a global scale emerge every day. So what can we do about it? And are there ways in which we can see technology not just as an obstacle or an enabler of illicit markets, but also as a tool to help us fight them? So we're going to hear from 5 great speakers today who all try to do this on a daily basis. Each of them will speak for 5 minutes, and then we'll open up to you in the audience for questions, for challenge, for ideas, and for additional inspiration. We want to know what you think about these markets, about the work that we're doing, and the opportunities and challenges that we're all facing. So when we get to question and comment time, please raise your hand in the bar below so that we can unmute you to speak, and don't be shy. We want to hear from you, and you can also place questions in the chat as well, which we'll try to respond to. So first up, we have Simone Haysom, who will briefly introduce herself and then talk more about these technological challenges and opportunities as we see them in GI-TOC. Simone, over to you, please.
Thank you, Louise. It's a pleasure to be sharing this work with everyone today. I'm a senior analyst at the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organised Crime. I've been working on the issue of online markets for illegal wildlife products for around 3 years now. Recently, this work has been concentrated in what we call the Market Monitoring and Friction Unit. It's really a team within Global Initiative that is drawing together a range of different skills to both approach a problem that has been generated by technological advances, and also to concentrate thinking about how to use technology in responding to it. I sometimes tell people that I feel like what we're trying to do is build a sort of decentralized cyborg, because we're both working with algorithms and with software, apps, and tools, but very crucially trying to adjust those based on the expertise of people who understand the specific ways in which specific species are traded, or bring in insights from responding to other types of cyber-enabled crime. We really see ourselves as a team that is trying to work in partnership and collaboration with a range of different actors to not just generate new approaches, including new tools, but also work out how to get the best out of those tools, how to integrate them into responses which are actually effective at decreasing the amount of content that is found on platforms, e-commerce and social media platforms that services a demand for illegal wildlife products, but also tackles other ways in which the increasing imbrication of our lives with digital platforms and digital technologies have brought threats to wildlife. That includes the normalization of the consumption of wildlife by finding it on the same platforms where you're going about saying happy birthday to your best friends and responding to an event invitation, to also the ways that traders build up profiles and cultivate demand. I often tell people that what we're doing is looking at the ways that, firstly, mapping illicit flows for wildlife, and then looking at the ways that they touch down on the internet. And we do that through 3 Ds. One of them is disruption. So that's that engagement with people who are responding to the problem. That's the generation of different tools and ways of responding. But it relies on 2 other Ds, which are really about creating an evidence base that makes that disruption effective. The first D is data that's big. And for that, we've been using a tool which we call the Cascade that has been generated in partnership with the Center for Social Media Analysis. My colleague Theo is going to talk about it in more detail, so I won't go into that now. But this is a machine learning enabled set of processes that allow us to search for and understand commercial activity related to the illegal wildlife trade online. We use it to generate big data aspects of the evidence base. So very recently, we've published a report on the domestic and regional markets for African grey parrots in Africa, which was an attempt to map an emerging market, though what we did find was extremely large markets in 2 countries, which have already been developing for some time. And then several places where there were small markets where early intervention could prevent larger markets arising. In the pangolin study, which Theo is going to talk about, we've been using that data to understand the weaknesses in supply chains that allow illicit products to enter illicit markets. We use it to assess the scope of established markets, and we use it to identify platforms with the highest density of problematic material, or prolific traders or key nodes that connect consumers and traders. The second D is deep data. So we've been generating a skills base and a body of expertise using open source monitoring, as well as combining big data studies or open source with fieldwork to dig deeper into the ways in which the internet is used to facilitate illegal trafficking of wildlife. That can involve profiling traders using OSINT methodologies or profiling websites or manufacturers. It can involve understanding consumer motivations from understanding conversations that take place in social media and on online subcultures. And it can also mean straightforward monitoring of sites which are not amenable to machine learning processes. It means currently also understanding image-based content. And Deb's going to pick up on this, but I think that this is really the forefront of the challenge around technical development, because increasingly what monitors see is that wildlife content is marketed and advertised almost solely using images. As an example of what the combination between big data and deep data can produce, what I'm showing you here is a supply chain that was developed by a partner that we've worked with a lot, the World Parrot Trust, which is in a collaboration with ACO, the Association for Countering Crime Online, where we've been putting together examples of how to make typologies for supply chains, dividing those supply chains into different phases and giving authorities, who might be people working for private sector companies where this content is arising, or could be law enforcement, or could be other civil society monitors, to say how that particular phase in the supply chain is linked to the use of the digital technology. and also the extent to which that content can be identified as being clearly illegal or not. We've also recently, in August, released guidance that was produced in partnership with Legal Atlas. It's a checklist that can be used as a tool by responders to assess the full range of different laws that could apply to content that's found online, and help people to identify legal and illegal content. We're also going to be releasing guidance around producing these types of typologies, as well as further big data studies using the tool, which help us to develop that evidence base, which then helps us to target our guidance, suggestions, or tools, or direct engagement on disrupting illicit flows online. I'm going to stop there and hand over to the other panelists who are going to be getting into the granular work of how one does that.
Thank you, Simone. That's really kind. So now we're going to move to Theo, who's been working with Simone on the issue of pangolins that are being found, or parts of derivatives of pangolin that are being found in traditional Chinese medicines, and how you've used Cascade to support this work. So Theo, over to you, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Simone and Louise, and thank you guys for joining in, for your interest in our research. So yeah, my name is Theo Clement. I'm working with the Global Initiative, and I'm the lead researcher on a study that looks at online markets for pangolin-based products, especially products that are TCM, so traditional Chinese medicine. So as mentioned by Simone, to do this study, we've been using a specific software called the Cascade. So it's a machine learning based solution. So it's a machine learning enabled web scraper that is designed, as mentioned by Simone already, designed and operated by our partner, so the Center for Analysis of Social Media. Cascade acts as a web scraper that uses keywords and search terms to automatically scrape what is technically and legally searchable on the internet. Following several rounds of detection or several rounds of searches, it provides us with a list, usually a long list of detections that are likely attempts at selling illicitly pangolin-based items. So these detections have been assessed for relevance by human coders. And these first initial detections have been fed back into the Cascade, which is able to train classifiers and generate new search terms and new keywords to improve its relevance yield. So for this specific study, we had to make 3 different rounds of detections, which took approximately 3 months to end up with a total detection of 4,000 different detections that have been then assessed for relevance. One of the key advantages of the Cascade is that it's platform and language agnostic. So basically, it can work in any language, and it works in almost all platforms that are technically or legally searchable. In other words, compared to human analysis, it's very good at looking for stuff where we don't expect to find anything. It's really unbiased in the way it's conducting its searches. So the Cascade is operated by Haysom, so the Center for Social Media Analysis, but we are able to collect the result from the Cascade by using this dashboard that I don't have time to really explain to you in detail, but basically we end up with this dashboard that helps us collecting the data, or at least gathering the data. And for this particular TCM, so pangolin-based TCM drug study, we have been searching Chinese and English language website. We also started to look at Vietnamese websites, but the yields were not sufficient enough for us to provide data for the analysis. We ended up with 930 relevant detections, so 900 confirmed attempt at trading illicit drugs, illicitly trade pangolin-based TCM drugs. These detections has provided us with actionable intelligence on various actors and networks that are ignoring domestic and international laws and regulation against wildlife trafficking, but also, and maybe more important to us, I mean, the scale of the research that was enabled by using the Cascade provided us information not only about the actors, but also about the structure of the market in China and abroad, including the key actors, key nodes, the degree of likely illicit trade, etc. Following this study, we've established a series of key findings that we think were only possible by using the Cascade, a machine learning-based methodology. So basically, we've been able to verify that the Chinese laws that exist to verify that medicinal ingredients are sustainably sourced were almost never observed in online advertisements. There is a very, very high degree, more than 85% of online advertisements that do not respect Chinese laws in Chinese language. We have identified a new category of actors that are very active in this criminal network, which are Chinese agents that are neither supplier nor manufacturer nor consumers, but that act as amplifier and are basically a matchmaker between consumers and producers. And these are not bound by Chinese regulations for the time being. We've identified, of course, numerous e-commerce platforms that are advertising for or even manufacturing pangolin containing TCM drugs outside of China. We, in particular, identified a California-based company that is manufacturing drug in California using pangolin scales. And we've also established that we have a large number of criminal actors that are using various techniques to obfuscate the presence of pangolin scales or other ingredients in the drug they advertise or sell. So we are still analyzing the results and we will be publishing the results of that study likely in the beginning of 2022.
Thank you. Some very interesting findings that I'm sure people are going to want to interrogate you a bit on further, which we're very happy to do. But first, let's hear from Wahyu. So Wahyu has also been working with us here at GI from a slightly different perspective in terms of the Indonesian live bird trade and how Facebook acts as a very active market for that. So if I can hand over to you, Wahyu, it would be great to hear from you.
Okay, thank you, Louise. Well, hello, everyone. Nice to see you all. My name is Wahyu. You can call me Wahyu. Well, I'm part of the MMFU team that are researching how does the wildlife trade manifest on Facebook with the case study of the Indonesia bird trade. Well, why we did the research in Indonesia? Well, Indonesia is one of the central or the heart of the wildlife trade, especially in Southeast Asia, and bird species is one of the sought after species among other species. And it is well evident that wildlife trade has destroyed many wildlife species, including bird. Our research is focused on the monitoring of bird trade, especially in the Facebook, because we found that the shift of the trade from open or on-site market to online market has happened very significantly in the past few decades. So we are looking at the selling and buying groups at Facebook to understand how the bird trade manifests on the online platform, and why we are focused on Facebook, because among other platforms, Facebook is the most popular social media and also platform where a lot of people selling illicit or illegal goods, including birds. Well, the key activities of our monitoring on Facebook is the first trade monitoring. We search the relevant advertisement through keywords, and beforehand we identify kind of the species that we think they are important to be monitored, and we refer to the Appendix 1 series and also the Indonesian conservation law, which we sort out the species based on these two categories, and we focus on the 4 species that are listed in the Appendix 1 CITES and also in the conservation law in Indonesia. And we also add one another species, which is the African grey parrot, because we think it is important to our monitoring. Once we got the relevant advertisement, we extract the information for the advertisements, like the identification of the sellers, the detail of the market, the price, key contact, location, and other relevant information. And then we also monitor the movement of the group, because we see that Facebook just implement the shutdown groups. So we are trying to understand how the dynamic of the movement among the seller and buyers on Facebook in facing of this shutdown policy. And yeah, this is the result of our monitoring. We monitor from June and September 2021, and we found more than 1,000 advertisements are recorded according to our manual monitoring, with at least 71 groups are monitored. And in terms of the dynamic of the group monitoring, we see that every week it's about 9.3%. There's an increased member, which is about more than 130 new members in each group. And according to our recorded data, we found nearly 600 sellers advertise their birds in the groups. And the group is usually moderated by at least one moderator, and commonly 2 moderators moderate the groups. This moderators has a unique role in the group, because they will create a rules. So the moderators will monitor how group activity, and especially this is more interesting when they realize that Facebook has implemented the shutdown group or shutdown policy, and these moderators try to manage the group so they can avoid that their group still can be maintained and avoid this shutdown from the Facebook. So yeah, some rules usually created by moderators to avoid this shutdown. And in terms of the locations in Indonesia, we found a lot of advertisements coming from people live in Java Island. This is might be because the Java Island is one of the centers of bird activity, which a lot of people or bird hobbyists live in, and also there are cultural sense of the rehoming birds. Sometimes they think that having birds or rehoming birds is one of the social culture, and also they have singing bird competitions that really impact on this bird trade. Yeah. Focusing on the monitoring of the dynamic on Facebook, this group shutdown is really dynamic, because every week or almost everyone, Facebook try to shut down many groups. And interestingly, once a group is closed by Facebook, many people, or at least the moderators, or maybe new people, they try to create a new group, and they persuade people to join in the new group, and this movement is happen regularly. So yeah, although the group has been closed, they create a new group, and yeah, happening continuously. And we think this activity kind of sudden groups likely not truly effective to intervene this market. And because they have already know that Facebook implemented a certain group. So many sellers, they try to avoid this one through using a code or when they advertise an advertisement, they will only post a single picture with a very short keyword, but this keyword only be understood by the sellers or the buyers or among the group hobbies. Yeah, this is kind of how they reframe the text on advertisement. So the Facebook team can't to recognize the group and undetectable. As the implication, we conclude that this to intervene the online market, especially the bird trade, it is likely less effective through the shutdown group. But another options may be more effective, like introducing the captive breeding development or other intervention alternative. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Wahyu. Great to hear some of your findings there. I know that's been built on a lot of hard work from your side, so thank you for that. We're going on to our final set of panelists now before we then open to questions. And I see that some of these are already popping up in the Q&A, for which thank you. So keep your eye on that, everybody, because there's some interesting questions being asked and answered there. So now I'm going to hand over to Tanya and Deb, who work for Lens Corporation, who are dedicated to ensuring that artificial intelligence is used for social good. So we can hear a bit more from them on their projects and their work, please. Over to you guys, and please start sharing your slides as appropriate.
Hi all, very nice to meet you. Thank you, Louise, for the very nice introduction. So yeah, I'm Debayan, CEO at Lens Corporation, and with me I have my colleague Tanya, who's going to talk a little bit more about our solution to this problem. So we at Lens, our goal is to build AI artificial intelligence models for social good. Our main mission is to impart trust in AI systems, that is, make these systems be more explainable and transparent to the end user and consumers. So to this effort, we have three very big, broad schemes of work. One is digital identity for all. This here, we try to ensure that our systems can provide digital identity to all spheres of humankind, including infants including infants, sorry. So we also provide digital identity to animals, which is what we're going to talk about today. And then the third kind of course of action that we follow is forest fire detection using aerial surveillance. So yeah, recognition of animals in the wild is critical for understanding the evolutionary processes that guide biodiversity. Researchers must be, they must be able to reliably recognize each individual animal in order to observe that the animal's variation within a population. Unique appearance-based cues such as body size, presence of scars and marks, and coloring are often used for interim studies, but these attributes are subjective and vary over time. Therefore, they are very unreliable in longitudinal studies, which are necessary for study of long-term population health and behavior, group dynamics, and heritability and effects of traits. Biologists and anthropologists have started to adopt more rigorous tracking methods for individualizing each animal. For instance, they have resorted to the use of GPS tags and collars, the two images on the top, as you can see. While these approaches have been shown to be successful for studying animals and in various several long-term conservation efforts, they are problematic in a number of ways. First, these devices can be expensive. They can range from $400 to $4,000 per animal, and they're also very time-consuming to apply. Second, tagging in such manners requires capture of animal, which has demonstrated negative effects. It can disrupt social behavior and cause intense stress, injury, and sometimes they're even fatal to the animal. So our goal here is to find a non-invasive method that can help identify each individual animal while being non-invasive, especially for already endangered species. So another opportunity for us is to safeguard these endangered primates. This is in the case of the problem, the growing problem of trafficking. So primate trafficking is a booming business in which these animals are captured from the wild for shipment around the globe. In the case of great apes, for example, it is estimated that 22,000 individuals were lost between 2005 and 2011 due to illegal trade. In contrast, only 27 arrests were made in connection with such trade, indicating that little has been done to solve the problem. One of the issues with this problem is the lack of evidence to say, you know, this is the actual animal that was illegally traded and captured and so forth. So if a captured individual can actually be identified, this will provide information about the animal's origin, provide insight into their capture, and help us build evidence using imagery to, track these illegal wildlife trafficking. So next slide. So we propose a non-invasive, rapid and robust solution for tackling this problem. We are designing a smartphone application. We have demonstrated that our approach is effective against illegal wildlife trafficking. And we are modeling our system based on human face recognition systems. However, we customize it specifically for certain species and primates. We have demonstrated our approach to be very effective against a few species within primates, such as lemurs, golden monkeys, and chimpanzees. So how a face recognition or primate face recognition would work is that we first capture the images of primates, either using a smartphone camera, or we can set up camera traps in conservations. And then our in-house face recognition system will extract salient and robust face features that can automatically match primates, and then identify who this primate is from a database of a large database of primates, and it will also provide us some sort of probability-based evidence to say yes, the computer is, let's say 98% sure that these two primates are the same. So now I will hand off to my colleague Tanya. She would talk a little bit more about our final solution that we're trying to build here.
Thank you, Debayan. So our model achieves a state-of-art accuracy in individualizing the certain species like lemurs, chimpanzees, and golden monkeys. Basically performs extremely fast inference. I have tested it myself, and I've been working on it. So yeah, and it takes a few more megabytes for storage, and for a mobile application it would be even less. So with the help of that application, it would be easy for authorities in charge to keep a check on the trafficking, and it could be really helpful in tracking and monitoring wildlife non-invasively. That's a key point here.
Thank you. That's all from Lens's side.
Great. Thanks, everybody. That's fascinating, and actually jumped across a number of different fields there, from AI to Facebook to internet scraping, all of which raise a number of different questions, I think, that I'm fairly confident people in the audience might want to interrogate us on, and please do, as we say. So if I could ask all of the panelists to turn their cameras on, please, that would be fantastic. We already have a few questions that have popped up in Q&A, and I will just run through those to give people time to raise their hand or put additional questions in the box for us today. So just to remind you of some of the questions that have been asked if you haven't been able to monitor the Q&A. So Moazu was asking about how do we scrape the dark web, or if we scrape the dark web, and whether we use Cascade to do that. And Simone's response was, as you can sort of see here, is that there isn't a huge amount of evidence that trade is shifting onto the dark web in this particular market. Partly because the online trade on the open net is so prevalent that actually it kind of negates the need for it to go there. And then there's a question there about coded language as well that Theo has responded to. Carol, you've also asked a question around, for Wahyu, talking about sort of strong cultural connections with the illegal wildlife trade. How difficult is that to shift? And I might actually ask Simone to have a go at answering that question as well. Wahyu has also put in some thoughts there, which are super helpful. Thank you. And then Fiona, thank you so much for coming. It's nice to hear from you. And it's good you saying that the Cascade tool is making some progress and getting results. Yep. And so there's the response there from Simone on that in terms of then what we're doing about these results, because that's the most important thing in some respects. It's all well and good finding all of this data, as Simone mentioned, but what are we then actually doing about it? So Simone, can I hand over to you a little bit to talk a bit more in detail, understanding some of these processes are relatively new to us. But again, and ask some questions to the audience as well about where they think our disruption efforts should be focused. But if you can talk a bit about disruption and what it means to us, please.
Yeah, thanks everyone for the questions. And yeah, thanks to the other panelists for your presentations. I think that this question about what to do about what we're finding online is a really interesting one right now. I know there are a couple of people in the audience who have worked in different enforcement capacities or with NGOs who've been following this issue for a long time. And I think that several organizations have been sort of raising the alarm about online markets for now almost 2 decades. I think some of the first traffic surveys of online markets were in the early 2000s. So it's really not a new issue. And there has been progress. There has been, big tech companies are part of a coalition with other large and important NGOs that are concerned with illegal trade. There's been work done to, enforce keyword bans on people's searches, etc. I think to an extent, though, that work is both important and effective because, as has been mentioned, a lot of this content is extremely blatant. People are making the subject line, buy endangered parrot. So if you set up a search, a word ban on, endangered parrot, that's a good measure to put in place. But there's also an extent to which some of this is the low-hanging fruit of really shifting the dynamics of how these platforms can be used. And there's also, I think, what is emerging is that in the online space, a lot of the actions taken by e-commerce platforms have been, I think, more effective at reducing the amount of content. We have some of that data from the Indonesia study where we did search e-commerce platforms in Indonesia, and the comparison of what we found on places like Tokopedia versus Facebook is just, astounding. In 3 months, I think it was something like 30 advertisements on Tokopedia versus 1,000 on social media. And in part that may be because e-commerce companies are more fully embracing the fact that they are in the business of selling things, whereas there's an extremely complicated conversation about what social media companies are and what responsibilities they do and don't have. And I think, it's something I've been thinking about, especially in relation to Wahyu's work, where we were monitoring Facebook groups and the degree to which we could find species we had chosen because they were so clearly linked to sort of high levels of protection, as opposed to there is also an extremely large songbird market in Indonesia, which also has high levels of illegality, but there are more ambiguities around determining that legality. Groups were being shut down in part because one of the traffic was signaling to Facebook that there was illegal trade in various bird species and having groups shut down. We don't know if that accounts for all the closures, but in general, what we find is that enforcement is very driven by NGOs who are monitoring trade and who are raising the alarm, and that the internal enforcement procedures are inadequate. And with Facebook, a lot of this comes down to just being able to signal according to their community standards that content is problematic. We have for a long time thought that closing groups would be very effective because it creates friction for traders who then have to reestablish and have lost this kind of cultivated community of consumers. But in the context of Indonesia, where there were dozens and dozens and dozens of Facebook groups with thousands of members and just constant trade, we found that the new groups would be set up and then would attract, hundreds of new members a week, and then very quickly become large again. And I think, it is partly still mysterious to us how they were able to do that. But one hypothesis is that while it appears that they're all moderated by, mostly moderated by different people, that's not the case, and that there are key nodes and certain people who can sort of direct that reformation of the consumer base. And as NGOs, we're really limited in our ability to investigate if that's the case, but the platform is not. But it requires a much more sophisticated enforcement strategy to ask those questions about how the markets are functioning. And I think a lot of the disruption challenge is about, I suppose, being able to measure and understand the effect of, what are the suggested measures to curb these markets, but also to push really key actors to be adopting enforcement strategies that are adequate instead of just sort of possible within the frame of reference of their business models.
Thanks, Simone. Did you touch a bit more on, there was a question there about behavior change that was posted to Wahyu in terms of some of those kind of the broad term in which we see the word disruption, if you like, or friction?
Yeah, I think that's it's a really important question that in a lot of the GI's illicit flows work, there are a lot of overlaps between illicit and illicit trade. There are a lot of companies that are engaging in illicit trade in circumstances where if they were held to account, they might just be illicit trade companies. There's a certain amount of opportunism that comes into, rather than people being dedicated to trading a species to extinction or dedicated to another type of crime. And for consumers, there's also not always very often not a huge understanding of what's illegal and what isn't. We're currently tendering for a consultant to work with on engaging in sort of behavior change interventions, which would, might possibly try to raise awareness of illegality or not, if that's counterproductive, because some of the research does say it can be. But otherwise shift norms within the communities around how consumption happens. And I think one of the opportunities that the internet creates is that there is this opportunity to identify consumers and to engage with them about the effects of the choices that they're making. And that's something that we're actively exploring.
Thanks, Simone. I can't see any other live questions at the moment, and I think people are a bit shy to raise their hands, but I would strongly encourage you to do so, because we'd really like this to be a discussion. You don't have to ask a question. You're also very welcome to just comment on some of the things that you're hearing today. There is one that's just popped in. Let me have a look, from Ali. Hi, everyone. Very interesting presentation. A question for Wahyu about Indonesia. To what extent has the Indonesian government responded to the issue of the illegal wildlife trade? So I'll ask Wahyu to respond to that, but then I'd also like to ask Theo to comment in terms of some of those results that you mentioned, Theo, in terms of finding evidences across multiple jurisdictions and whether we've had any success with our engagement on that front. But Wahyu first, please.
Okay. Thank you, Ali, for the questions. To what extent the Indonesian government responds to the issue of IWT? Well, actually, the Indonesian government has started to work hard to respond to this illegal wildlife trade. There's as long as I know, they have already working well in terms of the trafficking or the seizure. But for the internet, for the online trade, I think it is still lack of the policy, because until now there's no clear regulations for the how to work in the internet on the online platform, and they still focus on the common goods, like for common market, but still exclude the potentials of illegal or species or illegal wildlife to be involved in the market. So for non-internet market, I think the government have already worked, but for the internet platform, still lack of this one.
Interesting. Theo, I'd like your reflections too, and then I'm going to ask Deb to respond, but then Simone, actually I might come to you at the end to also then give a comment on the kind of that angle that Wahyu's talking about in terms of government action on the illegal wildlife trade, but are we seeing it in the online spaces and in the cyber domain? Theo, first on the pangolins, please.
Well, yeah, thanks a lot, Louise. I'm actually going to answer several questions at once, because someone in the chat, I'm forgetting the name, sorry, actually mentioned what we do with these detections and with the intelligence we gather during our research. So, I mean, the whole point of the global initiative is not only to research, but also to have some real world impact. And the intelligence we collect is most of the time, if not always, sent to either law enforcement agencies or can be used as part of our private sector engagement efforts. When it comes to liaising with law enforcement agencies, we have had a very positive experience, especially on the pangolin study, because some of the illicit activity we detected took place in jurisdictions such as European countries, the UK, or the US, which are relatively easy targets for us when it comes to liaising with other countries that do not have the same transparency or the same, or people are much harder to contact and to liaise with. The results are not always that present, but we are not giving up on that, of course, and we will be continuing our efforts, especially next year on that front. We have had some strong successes with private sector engagements. Not so much on the pangolin study because it's still developing, but on a previous study that has been done on African grey parrots traded online, especially in Africa. So we have been able to have several companies deleting, I don't remember actually, Simone might know, but more than thousands of links from their websites. And we are also engaging with another company that is very well implemented in Africa, that is going to completely change its wildlife trade policy, thanks to due to our efforts, research efforts, and continuing private sector engagement with them. So it's not necessarily perfect in the sense that they don't necessarily go the way we want them to go, but it's still a significant improvement from being a completely unregulated actor and selling basically any kind of animal online.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that, Theo, and thanks for bringing in some of those, actually, as you say, initial successes from the African grey parrot engagement as well. Deb and Tanya, do you have any views on, what's your experience been in terms of engaging with governments and law enforcement agencies around your work, and what's their reactions?
Yeah, thanks a lot for the question. So for the longest part, the hardest issue that we had to actually deal with was actually in the realm of primate face recognition, or for any animal for that matter. It's a very challenging problem in itself, because it's really hard to come across data to train these artificial intelligence systems. So the first kind of uphill battle that we had to fight was to find some data And even there, how do we train these AI models to generalize with looking at very few individual animals that we have data for? So that being said, we have worked with, there was a few cases here and there. There was one in Kathmandu. So we worked with Project to End Great Ape Slavery, Pegasus, Daniel Stiles from there. So we've been dealing with a few cases here and there where what we do here is that they submit some photos to us. We run it through our automatic face recognition system for primates, and then we provide the results back to them. And then they work on more of the other side of the problem. So they're more aware of what happened with those results. But I believe what we are trying to do now is going to be one of the, let's say, toughest challenges. But then this would be, I would have better data in some time, because what we're trying to do right now is to generalize our systems to accommodate for, let's say, any primate species or other animals. So we're trying to make this system more generalizable to lots of different species. So that way, there's a new case that's not, let's say, primates, even some sea lions or something or the other. So then our system can still adapt to that new species very quickly with very limited data, let's say, and then still be able to give some evidence. So we're basically at the early stages, but I think this is, such a important but niche field.
Thanks. Simone, are you able to sort of give a sort of broader perspective in terms of what is the kind of legal framework that exists or doesn't around these things, and what are the kind of bigger challenges here?
Thanks, Louise. Yeah, that's a really big picture question. And I think, when we try to locate this problem sort of in the broader landscape of development issues and organized crime issues, it becomes very clear that it sits in between sort of two different, I would say, systemic challenges. One are the legal frameworks around the environment, wildlife crime. I think there's been massive development of those laws in a number of jurisdictions over the last 10 years, particularly since the poaching crisis. But they're still very uneven and fragmented, and they're often poorly understood by the actors who would, have some responsibility towards them, whether that's private sector or that's law enforcement. It's, even the Secretary General of the UN has said that legal frameworks around the environment are fragmented and incoherent. The other one is around cyberspace. So that this is both the sort of current global, slightly deadlocked issue around cybercrime and how different countries understand what it is and want to respond to it. And it's also, these issues that also different parts of the world are grappling with differently around the fact that technology companies have become the biggest companies in the world. They have a lot of power, and they are currently under a lot of fire for being poorly regulated around a whole range of online harms. And there are big, essentially political debates, for which policy hasn't already formed around what their roles and responsibilities are. And the issue of online trafficking of wildlife falls in between these two, because it creates a really muddied picture of jurisdiction, responsibility, mandate, and that is an underlying problem to really making it a priority for governments and for law enforcement, and really, shifting the private sector response from we will generously perform this act of self-regulation to we have a liability here that means that we have to invest in taking action.
Yeah, and as we know, that's part of a much, much bigger, almost sometimes geopolitical debate. So it's interesting how sometimes these things just can fall through the cracks of these much bigger issues. Thank you so much to everybody on the panel. We do have an additional 15 minutes, but I don't see any additional questions in the Q&A or any raised hands. And sorry if I'm being incompetent, it's entirely possible. But if there are any sort of final questions. We do have time for one or two more, but equally, I'm not going to drag this out if we have kind of exhausted everybody already at this time of the morning. I will take the opportunity then to thank you very much for coming and for listening to us and for giving us the opportunity to share some of these insights and the challenges that we're facing with you. We're really grateful. Please stay in touch. You can reach us at mmfu@globalinitiative.net. I sound like an advert. I'm going to be regulated by an e-commerce platform shortly, I hope. But it was really nice to get to know some of you through the chat, and please do stay in touch. And thank you, panelists. Have a great day. All the best. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the OC24 podcast. For more talks, have a look at the podcast feed on whichever platform you use. There are loads more to listen to. Video versions of these talks are also available on the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organised Crime YouTube channel. If you would like to share these talks around, we ask that you use the hashtag OC24 and let us know what you think. The 24-hour conference on global organised crime is brought to you by the European Consortium of Political Research Standing Group on Organised Crime, the Centre for Information and Research on Organised Crime, the International Association for the Study of Organised Crime, and the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organised Crime. For more information, head over to oc24.globalinitiative.net. This has been the OC24 podcast from the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organised Crime. Thanks for listening.